Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenweller here tonight on July 25th to take you through your Alaska weather tonight. As always, you can get in touch with us at the offices using the phone number here, 1-800-472-0391. And you can follow the prompts there to get to any of the three offices or any of the automated forecasts that you might be looking for. Weather.gov/Alaska will give you the whole statewide perspective from the National Weather Service, and you'll be able to select the area that you are most interested in. And then if you need to get in touch with us, you can use email as well, nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov, and Dave Snider or someone else will be back with you within about 24 hours. So let's jump right into our headlines here. You can see the primary thing we're going to talk about is that there's just not a lot of real strong storms out there right now. Fairly quiet in terms of any deep low pressure systems, and also pretty quiet in terms of the steering flow around the state. So pretty weak flow, and things are not changing all that quickly throughout the area. Better chances for rain are coming late tonight for southern Alaska, mainly rain stretching from southwest all the way over to the Cook Inlet and a little bit more towards the Copper River Basin as we go through the overnight hours into early Wednesday. Fog and marine stratus trapped under high pressure over the Bering Sea, and we'll look at that here on the satellite. And then rain moving back into southeast Alaska as we speak, and a low pressure system is going to set up over there, helping to keep some rain in the forecast for the next several days. So as we talk about all that rain, you can see since yesterday that our fire danger, which was out over the Copper River Basin and a little bit higher here yesterday up in the Yukon Valley, has subsided quite a bit. Continues to be a fairly wet pattern moving from west to east over the Arctic and the Brooks Range. And so with that, we've seen some more rain in these areas, helping to dampen the fire danger even more so. Do have some possibility of some thunderstorms the next couple days, but fuels are getting rather wet after all this cool and cloudy weather that we've been experiencing in those areas. Taking a look at our satellite now, let's put this visible loop into motion. So here is our first area of low pressure that we'll focus on for southeast Alaska. This is just slowly working its way up to the north here, and with that just starting to see the rain move into the Sitka region this afternoon. Still kind of trailing down here towards Ketchikan, but it will work its way to the north. Not a strong system. Some coastal ridging here along the northern Gulf Coast, and that's helping to keep things pretty quiet up here. And then here's where we have our southwest to northeast flow across much of the state, and that is helping to keep widespread cloud cover, some precipitation for southwest and parts of the Susitna Valley, and just general cooler and cloudier conditions than what we saw over the weekend. Let's put that loop into motion again. Things improving with high pressure starting to build in over the Brooks Range and up north near Arctic Village. And so we've seen much quieter weather there as well, just some spotty showers. We do have some thunderstorms just east of the Alcan border, but those should stay over in the Canadian region. And then we do have a cold front dropping through towards the Seward Peninsula. This is more of an upper level cold front, so don't expect a real drop in temperatures at the surface, but it certainly could bring some more rain to an area that's already seen quite a bit of rain over the past 48 to 72 hours. So here we are now on the infrared image, and taking a look at that high pressure setup. It's mainly down south of Atka and Adak, but you can see some of this marine stratus is trapped here at the surface. So that's going to keep, even though high pressure is in play, it's going to keep things rather cloudy and calm winds, but cloudy and foggy out over the Aleutians and the Pribilof Islands. And then one last time here, let's take a look. As we can see, this fairly tightly packed low pressure system, but it's falling apart, and that cold front that's trailing with it is really not going to make a whole lot of a dent in the temperatures at the surface as it moves into western Alaska. So now as we look at the map here, you can see that area of low pressure over southeast Alaska this afternoon. Rain just starting to work its way north of the Dixon Entrance region, and that's a fairly weak low pressure system at 1,011 millibars. And that rain again will slowly drift up to the north here. And there's our thunderstorms just east of the Alcan border there, right associated with this thermal trough stretching from east to west. A little bit of smoke reported up in the Yukon Valley, but not really reducing visibility a whole lot, but still possibility of some patchy haze up in those areas. As we get closer to southern Alaska and southwest Alaska, you can see there fairly clear skies along the coastal regions, but as you move off towards Cook Inlet in southwest, that's where we start to see the uptick in cloud cover and some spotty showers along the Chugach and Kenai Mountains. Certainly a little bit more widespread rain as we get towards the King Salmon area in Bristol Bay. The radar is still out here in King Salmon. It's been very intermittent for the past week or two. We do apologize for that. It is being worked on and hope to be back in service so that you folks out there can see what is going on in terms of precipitation. There's our weakening cold front this afternoon as it starts to move into the Seward Peninsula, and with that just expect spotty showers and some fog behind it as some of that cooler air moves over the warmer waters. Speaking of cooler air over warmer waters, well, the waters up over the Arctic are not all that warm, but they are open, and then pretty much any time you have high pressure up there, you can expect some fog to form up along the Arctic coast. So we do have some fog up there this afternoon near Barrow, and then out over the Bering Sea and over towards the Kamchatka Peninsula. That is where we see the most widespread and abundant fog and low stratus with that ridge of high pressure fairly strong at 1,033 millibars. It's a pretty potent ridge, but it will remain south of our area. And then over top of that ridge is a warm front trying to ride up into the Bering Strait region. It will make slow progress, but we'll see that here in the next couple of graphics. So looking again into tonight's forecast now. So you can see here our low is at 1,009 millibars, and it's starting to make its way a little bit further north and helping to spread some of that precipitation further north into southeast Alaska up into the Skagway area now. Our low that is out over the Canadian side of our border still has that thermal trough in here. Expect any thunderstorms to just turn into showers overnight and not be very widespread as the air mass is still fairly dry out here. And then along the Arctic coast and all the way down the west coast, you can see that patchy fog probably becoming dense in some locations. Hard to pinpoint exactly where that will be right now, but take a look at your local forecast to see exactly what visibility might be forecasted for any aviation purposes. Out towards southwest Alaska, that's where we have our bulk of precipitation associated with that low pressure system out there. And that again is going to slowly work its way up tonight into Cook Inlet region. Expect the best chances for rain overnight tonight, say around 4 a.m. into the early morning hours, about 10 a.m. for much of the Kenai and Cook Inlet region. Rain starting to move southwards into the Gulf of Alaska as well, associated with another frontal boundary, and then out over the Bering. That's our high still in charge with the weakening front, a warm front trying to move over top of it, again helping to keep plenty of fog, some of it dense out here towards the western Aleutians. Fog will definitely be in play until that ridge of high pressure moves off, which is not in the foreseeable future. And as we get into Wednesday now, high pressure continues to set up over the Arctic region, and so with that we can actually expect some drying conditions, especially during the afternoon hours when some sun breaks could help to really dry things out. Some thunderstorm development is expected just over the Eagle and just north of the Copper River Basin near the Alaska Range on Wednesday afternoon as we start to see some warmer temperatures with some more sun. Expect the instability to lead to some potential for convection in the afternoons, especially along the terrain. And that's courtesy of this thermal trough once again lining from east to west. That's going to be more or less a semi-permanent feature as we still have very summer-like temperatures out there. Rain from southwest Alaska moving into Cook Inlet again, but starting to kind of pivot now towards the south and southwest. And so not going to see anything overly heavy with this as this frontal boundary starts to weaken and fall apart. But we do expect fairly widespread wet conditions throughout southwest into south central Alaska. Out over the Bering, there's our 1,038 millibar high now, still strengthening, and so our warm front that's trying to move over top of it, not really having a lot of luck and falling apart as it does so, but you can see again more fog and stratus associated with that. And then again, southeast Alaska, rain still over that area for Wednesday afternoon and throughout the day, but it should be improving conditions as this low begins to weaken and fall apart. Taking a look at Thursday now. Still seeing some lingering rain showers, but it should be mostly tapering off and drying out, especially on Thursday, as some weak ridging tries to build in throughout that region. Thunderstorms are going to drop a little bit further to the south on Thursday afternoon over the Copper River Basin. Do have some isolated thunderstorms expected in that region, and just more showers as you get towards the Susitna Valley and Matanuska Valleys. The big story for much of southwest and southern Alaska is that as this area of low pressure moves off to the south, we do see a drying trend. Part of this ridge axis extends up through Bristol Bay and tries to sneak in here So we might see a little bit more breaks in the clouds and certainly drier conditions for southwest Alaska. However, for places like Bristol Bay, expect another foggy morning, especially on Thursday morning there. Over the west coast, this front that was trying to slip through the Bering is somewhat organized, but not expecting a whole lot of rain from this as it makes its way. It looks fairly ominous, but just some light rain as it makes its way into the Seward Peninsula, into places like Cape Newinham and eventually Bethel. And then drier conditions again for the Brooks Range and up north and into the interior portions of the state, where high pressure starts to build back in, and we should see things quieting down quite a bit, but no big storms on the horizon. Really, this high pressure is probably the most dominant feature in the pattern for the next several days. How about our temperatures as of 4 o'clock this afternoon? Well, out over southeast Alaska, temperatures generally in the upper 50s, even some low 60s, creeping up to 63 degrees at Skagway. As we look towards south central Alaska, 58 degrees there in Cordova, 57 at Valdez, and 63 at Gulkana Airport. Taking a look at the interior now, 64 degrees at Fairbanks and 66 degrees at Eagle. A little bit warmer towards the northern portions of the interior, 71 degrees in the interior. And then as you get to the Brooks Range, upper 50s and generally in the mid to low 40s for the Arctic coastline. Over the Seward Peninsula, generally conditions out in the low to mid 50s, even some 60s creeping in there. And the cool spot there, Cape Lisburne at 47 degrees. As we look towards southwest Alaska, Bristol Bay area, 63 degrees at Bethel this afternoon as of 4 o'clock, 58 degrees at King Salmon, and as we stretch out along the Alaska Peninsula, generally in the mid to low 50s, 68 degrees here at Falls Pass. This could be a little bit off, but we think with some sun breaks that it's possible with very warm air aloft that this is potentially the warmest spot across the southwestern portion of the state this afternoon. 51 at St. Paul, and then out towards the Aleutians, mid-50s and upper 40s for Shimia. How about for tonight? Well, with cloud cover still in play for much of the area, don't expect things to cool off a whole lot. That helps to keep our average temperature up, so for those gardeners out there, that is good news for the plants this time of year. Low 50s for southeast. Much of the south central area will also be in the low 50s. A couple spots in the upper 40s with clearer skies. Towards the central portion of the state, temperatures low 50s overnight tonight, and then along the Brooks Range and up to the north, upper 30s and low 40s. Southwest Alaska, you can expect temperatures in the upper 40s and low 50s tonight as well. And then for highs tomorrow, a little bit warmer tomorrow as we start to see some breaks in the cloud cover, especially over the Yukon area and the Tanana valleys. Possibility in the low 70s by tomorrow afternoon. For the southeast portion of the state, temperatures in the low 60s, and for south central and much of southwest Alaska, upper 50s and low 60s for your highs. How about for flying weather? Well, you can expect with all that widespread marine stratus and that fog out to the west, plenty of instrument flight rule conditions will dominate, and those again will stretch up with southwest flow, stretch up into parts of southwest Alaska, King Salmon, hugging into the Aleutian Range there and the Alaska Range. Couple spots of IFR conditions here across Kodiak Island and just north of Dixon Entrance for southeast Alaska. And then fog up along the Arctic will also make for some IFR conditions up in that area tomorrow morning. Small improvement by tomorrow afternoon, but still seeing some fairly widespread MVFR and IFR conditions here, especially out over the Bering and over the Arctic, mostly MVFR as the fog tries to lift up off the surface just a little bit. We do have some thunderstorms expected tomorrow afternoon, again over the eastern portion of the state. So be advised if you plan on traveling out in those areas. How about for our passes? Well, Anaktuvik Pass is going to be visual flight rules throughout the day. So is Adigan up north there. As we look at Lake Clark and Merrill, instrument flight rules will become marginal visual flight rules throughout the day. Small improvement. Same for Rainy. And Windy will be improving to VFR as we get towards the afternoon. Isabel will be VFR throughout the day. Mentasta is going to be MVFR, should be improving to VFR, but we do have that chance for thunderstorms, especially on the north entrance. So if you're using that pass, take caution. Tanita will be improving to VFR. Portage, MVFR, and Chilkoot and White will also be MVFR. How about for our freezing level? Well, not a whole lot to talk about here. Fairly high freezing levels throughout the state, all the way up to 8,000 feet. You don't even see the surface line unless you look north of the legend here, way up out over the Arctic. So for the icing, well, all the areas are going to be above 10,000 feet, so not a lot of concern if you're flying in the lower levels. However, we do have a few pockets in southeast and then along that warm, moist air mass over south central and southern Alaska. Just mainly light isolated moderate throughout the entire area. For our jet stream, again, fairly quiet without any real strong systems. You wouldn't expect a very strong jet, so we have about 85 knots moving from northwest down to southeast, supporting this area of low pressure out over the western portion of the state. And then our ridge of high pressure being fueled by 105 knots here out over the Kamchatka Peninsula, and that it's turning back down anticyclonically at about 70 knots. And then over towards southeast Alaska, just a fairly weak finger of the jet at about 75 knots here, supporting this area of low pressure near the Dixon entrance. How about for our 9,000 foot winds? Well, again, fairly similar to the jet stream there, coming anticyclonically or clockwise over top of this ridge of high pressure at about 35 knots, and then moving into the mainland at about 10 to 15 knots from the southwest, rolling over a ridge of high pressure in the Gulf, and then becoming counterclockwise once again as you get underneath this area of low pressure at about 25 knots southeastern portion of the Gulf of Alaska. Maybe possibly a little bit gustier down over the parts of the Alaska Peninsula and down towards the surface there over the eastern Aleutians, with some stronger winds moving through those gaps. Now at 3,000 feet, 30 knots underneath this area of low pressure, coming from the west to the east. Still southwesterly flow for much of the king salmon up through the Anchorage area, and then generally out of the north to northeast, 15 to 30 knots along the west coast. And again, strongest winds are going to be out over top of this ridge of high pressure at about 45 knots there in the southwest to the northeast fashion. So what does that mean for our turbulence? Well, it's going to be mostly confined to where that ridge of high pressure is. The strongest system in our area is that ridge of high pressure. So generally light to isolated moderate below 5,000 feet, and as those winds move and interact with the terrain here near the Aleutian range, you can expect some light to isolated moderate below 4,000 feet, and then just a few more pockets with some stronger winds moving through the terrain there below 5,000 feet. Stay tuned. We'll be back with your marine forecast.
Well, you have to love boats, and you have to love water, and you have to love Alaska, and you have to be a good boat operator, and you have to like it. And then you have to like people. So there's a number of factors that go into what makes up a water taxi operator. My name's Mako Haggerty. That's Mako like taco.
Good morning. What's going on? Yeah, good, yeah.
I live here in Homer, Alaska. I've lived here since 1982. That's 32 years. I came up here, I was a commercial fisherman, and then I got into water taxiing here in Kachemak Bay in 1996. And I've been doing the water taxi ever since. There's no such thing as a typical day. And there's no such thing as a typical day in commercial fishing. And there's no such thing as a typical day in water taxi, which is why becoming a water taxi operator was so easy for me and difficult for others, is because it's not a 9-to-5 job. A lot of people aren't mariners, so they don't understand why maybe I would do this all the time. Maybe only pick the nice days. But I actually like being out there on the rough days too. It's challenging, exciting, and fun. If you're just running a boat on flat, calm water all the time, that can be maybe a little bit boring. So every condition out there on the water I find to be enjoyable. I guess in the back of our mind, there's always danger, but I guess something could always happen. It's not something we focus on. I wanted to be a service to the people that live here. And that's basically, I think, what we've become. There's only two ways across the bay. One's by boat and one's by air. And if they can't fly into places like Seldovia, then the water taxi is the next alternative. There are people that are afraid of flying. There are people that have a lot of gear. Planes don't go everywhere. In fact, airplanes and even float planes are fairly limited in some of the places that they can access, and boats can access more places. We can pack more gear. And then, of course, there's the people that would rather take a boat than fly in a plane. Of course I've got fears. In fact, I would say that probably running boats was facing one of my fears. You know, drowning is, yeah, I do. Yeah, I would say that it's a, yeah, reoccurring dream, actually. I spend my entire life on the water, so that's probably just natural.
Thank you guys, it's been a pleasure.
During the summer, I'll take a lot of visitors across the bay to the park, and it'll be a bright, sunny summer day, and the water will be blue, and we might even see a whale crossing the bay, and people will come up to me and they'll tell me I have the best job ever. And I think that sometimes I do. But there are days that we go out there and we're battling the weather, the waves. We've got people on the other side of the bay that absolutely need to be picked up. So it's not a matter of choice whether or not we cross the bay. So sometimes I'll have people actually say, boy, your job sucks. Happiness is different for everybody, but yesterday I was out in the boat with some photographers, and the sun was out and the weather was really nice, and it was still winter, and we anchored up and got just some fantastic wildlife pictures there yesterday, and I realized there was no other place I'd rather be.
Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the segment. Taking a look at our sea surface temperatures from this afternoon. Area I want to focus on this afternoon is up here along the Arctic. You can see a fairly warm area starting to reach into maybe the, 10 degree or so Celsius range, and then the same on the western side of Barrow there. And so what that means for our ice pack is that we've actually started to see it become less and less in here. More melting is occurring, more marginal ice pack. And same on the west side, so we are expecting kind of a convergence on this area here with those warm waters from both sides. And so with that, this should continue to melt, and even some melting pushing all the way up into the main pack there. So a little bit, definitely ahead of schedule where we normally are for July 25th for the ice pack. So looking at our marines now, taking a look at southeast Alaska, generally conditions are going to be out over the south and southeast for the inner passageways there between 10 and 20 knots and seas 2 to 4 feet. Over the open waters, northwest winds for the northern portions at about 10 knots, seas 3 to 4 feet, and then south and east winds over the southern waters, 4 to 6 foot seas and 15 knots. On into Thursday now, a little bit more steady from the south and southwest here. Inner passageways between 10 and 20 knots and seas all the way up to 4 feet there for Lynn Canal. And over the open waters, again, generally 10 knots and seas generally about 4 feet. For South Central, pretty calm conditions for the most part. Really, the only winds to speak of are going to be out in Shelikof and to the southeast of Kodiak Island. Little bit here over the southern Cook Inlet, 10 to 15 knots out of the southwest, and otherwise 3 to 4 foot, and otherwise variable 10 throughout the rest of the region. Not a whole lot of change on Thursday. A little bit stronger of an up inlet push as we start to see some warmer air build in the Susitna Valley. We'll start to see winds pick up just a little bit and pull into there. So 15 knots out of the south. Otherwise variable at 10 throughout much of the area until you get down towards Shelikof and Kodiak Island, northeast 15, seas on the order of 3 to 4 feet. For the Alaska Peninsula, west and northwest flow, 20 knots, and that's where we can expect to see some stronger gusts to work through some of those passes there. Nothing overly strong, but 5 to 10 knots stronger maybe than the sustained winds, and seas between 4 and 5 feet. And on Thursday, even less in the sustained winds, 10 to 20 knots, again out of the north and northwest, and seas about 5 feet. For the Aleutians, generally west and northwest winds for this area as well, as they kind of are being influenced by that area of high pressure. Still fairly calm unless you're way out here, out over the western Aleutians, 25 knots out there, so small craft conditions, but otherwise 20 knots and 5 to 6 foot seas. And then for Thursday, not a lot of change, maybe a small uptick out over the western Aleutians, and for parts of areas near south of Nikolsky, generally 20 to 25 knots and seas 6 to 7 feet, except a little bit higher out there to the west. For the west coast, generally northwest winds along the coast and a little bit more west and southerly winds as you work out towards St. Matthew Island. And so with that, seas are going to be on the order of about 5 to 7 feet and winds between 15 and 25 knots. Southwest and southerly winds start to develop there on Thursday, generally between 15 and 25 knots, slightly stronger up here towards Gamble, and seas are building up towards 10 feet as you start to see that next frontal system approach that we talked about on the surface maps. For the northern portion of the state, for the Arctic coastline, northeast winds becoming westerly and then northeasterly again as you move around the horn there around the state, and generally fairly light between 5 and 20 knots unless you're just down here over north of the Seward Peninsula. That's where our strongest northwest winds are, seas between 1 and 5 feet. And then on Thursday, expect a little bit of an increase as that next frontal system approaches, starting to switch to the southerly winds now. Again, bringing in some of that warmer seawater, and seas between 4 and 7 feet and 25 knots for the wind speeds. Easterly and southeasterly along the Arctic coastline, 20 knots and 4-foot seas. So let's recap our weather. Our non-real strong systems, our biggest area of influence is this high down here to the southwest out over the North Pacific. So that's keeping things pretty quiet for the most part for the Bering. Some light rain moving into southwest Alaska, which will eventually make its way into south central Alaska late tonight, bringing our best chance of rain for the next 24 hours or so. And then some more rain for southeast Alaska as this system works to the north. On into Wednesday, do have some thunderstorms forecasted to develop over the eastern portion of the state during the afternoon heating, and just some rain starting to finally fizzle out over south central Alaska. Same story for southeast Alaska. And Thursday, expect drying conditions out over the southern portion of the state. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.